This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
He visited China 3 times in 3 years. He said China has brought enormous opportunities for win-win cooperation in the world. Opposed to picking sides, he said that national interests should be the priority of both domestic and foreign policies. While the West is adding fuel to the conflict in Ukraine, he believes that China's voice advocating for peace and dialogue is extremely valuable. Péter Szijjártó, Hungarian foreign minister, sits down for an exclusive interview with Leaders Talk.
Hello and welcome to Leaders Talk, where we meet leaders, thinkers, and trailblazers. I'm Zou Yun. Our guest today is Péter Szijjártó, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade of Hungary. How does he see the bilateral relations between China and Hungary moving forward? And amid this profound changes taking place, how does Hungary take its own development path? Today we're going to find those answers from an interview with Hungarian Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó. Foreign Minister, thank you so much for joining us here on Leaders Talk. Well, you have visited China twice in the past few years, but both times were during the COVID-19 pandemic. So it must feel very different this time, given that many things are now back on track. So how does it feel?
And of course, the pandemic has put forward extreme challenges ahead of us, all of us, I guess. But it has shown the meaning of friendship between the two countries and the two nations, because these very complicated years have shown to each other that we can rely on each other.
Exactly, both countries have stood the test of winds and rains.
Sure, and you know the fact that that Hungary was able to buy vaccines from China during the most challenging period of time, that was extremely helpful, because at that time the European Commission was not able to ensure the necessary supply of vaccines to the European countries. So we just had to sit and wait for the vaccines while people were dying, you know, and the pressure on our health care services was extremely high. So therefore we decided to get engaged in talks with both the People's Republic of China and the Russian Federation about purchasing vaccines from here. And since our experts have judged very clearly that the Sinopharm vaccine was able to save lives of the people and protect them from the lethal consequences of COVID, therefore we have vaccinated more than 1 million Hungarian people by Sinopharm vaccines. And that was very helpful from the perspective of being quick and winning the race against time,
right,
in this regard. And that has helped us to decrease also the negative economic impacts of COVID.
Hungary is a good friend of China in Europe, while both sides have not only forged very profound friendship, but also have achieved many milestones. And one of them is what you just said, that Hungary is the very first EU member to recognize and use a Chinese vaccine during the COVID-19 pandemic. Well, besides that, Hungary is also the very first European country to sign a MOU on the Belt and Road Initiative, and also the first CEE country to set up a RMB clearance bank, as well as issuing RMB bonds. So, Mr. Foreign Minister, how would you define these bilateral relations between the two sides, and what is your vision on the future of this partnership going forward?
Well, this is not an accident that a couple of years back our leaders have signed the agreement on enhancing this relationship to of nature of strategic cooperation. And we say strategic cooperation, we do not only say that, but we mean it as well. And throughout the last years, it have been proved that this relationship is for the mutual benefit of both countries. And I think the key to that was that we have always based this relationship on mutual respect. We never thought that we would know better than the Chinese how they would like to live in this country. And we have never had the ambition to tell the Chinese people how to accommodate their lives. And we have always rejected the pressure in Europe to judge and criticize and educate, lecture China. So I think that this mutually respectful relationship between the two countries have paid off very well. You know, to all these you have listed, I'd like to add the fact that Hungary became the #1 investment target of Chinese companies in Central Europe, and we are proud of that. In the recent years, it has occurred on multiple occasions that China was the #1 investor in a year, in that given year in Hungary. This is going to be the case this year as well, as huge Chinese companies decided to bring really significant investments into Hungary. You know, CATL, which is the #1 globally when it comes to producing electric batteries, has been completing now the biggest ever greenfield investment in the economic history of Hungary. And there are additional Chinese companies on the field of electric automotive industry who are deploying and locating their capacities, their European capacities, to Hungary. And this is extremely important for us because we have never looked at China as if it was a risk or a threat. We have always rejected this kind of approach in Europe. Therefore, we can't understand why we speak about decoupling or de-risking, because if there's no risk, you do not have to de-risk. We always have been looking at China as a country with which we can cooperate in a mutually successful and mutually advantageous manner. And this is the approach we will represent in the future as well.
Well, last month, after a NATO foreign ministers meeting, you said that Hungary doesn't want NATO to turn into an anti-China bloc. You also emphasized the need for mutually beneficial cooperation instead of rivalry. So what are the thoughts behind such remarks? And also, what role do you think Hungary could play in help to enhance the ties between China and Europe?
Look, when other countries speak about China as a rival, to be honest, I don't understand that. Why?
How do you see China?
Yeah, because we see China as a partner, as a country which offers huge opportunities for mutually beneficial cooperation. If someone is your rival, that means that you entered into a competition in something, and the partner or the other country entered competition as well, and then you compete with each other. I don't know any area where Hungary would have entered into a competition to be a rival with China. So instead of rivalry, or instead of speaking about risk, threat, and all this kind of stuff, we should look at how we can cooperate and how we can take advantage. And you know, I remember 2010, the share of European Union when it comes to global GDP was 22%. Share of China used to be 9%. Now, last year, share of China was 18%. And Europe's share was 17. So this means that it has turned around within 13, 14 years, you know, it has turned around. So China has a bigger share of GDP than we Europeans. So I don't think that the right answer would be to consider China as a threat or a risk. We should consider China as an entity with which we should cooperate in order to grow together. And how we can prove that is that we show that with a fair approach towards China, we were able to attract so much investments into Hungary, which have helped the Hungarian economy to stay on a growth path, to create new jobs, to ensure living standards for the people, to bring modern state-of-the-art technology in the country and keep up the progress. So I think that our goal can prove that working together with China brings much more benefit than looking at China as a threat or a risk.
And that is why that you once said that Hungary has now becoming a meeting point of investment from East and West, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we always believed in connectivity. We always believed in the global sharing of labor being good news. You know, so we are absolutely against dividing the world into blocks again. Unfortunately, there are many aspects which target towards that, unfortunately, you know?
That's exactly something that I want to ask, because you have just now emphasis, and also many times in different occasions you said we believe in connectivity, we believe in creating and maintaining links rather than block building. Well, given now the world is clouded with anti-globalization, with all those unilateral sentiment, so how do you see the significance of the Global Development Initiative, the Global Security Initiative, as well as the Global Civilization Initiative proposed by Chinese President Xi Jinping?
Well, we respect these global initiatives a lot. because they absolutely fall in line with our strategy, and they fall in line with our historic experience. You know, we are coming from Central Europe. We are located in Central Europe. And you know, Central Europe has been a loser of all East-to-West conflicts recently. Because if you are in between, you cannot be a winner. And if you look throughout our history in the recent decades, whenever there were clashes between East and West, regardless of the reason, timing, stakeholders, we were always on the losing side. And we don't want to be on the losing side anymore. We want to be on the winning side. So therefore, we urge for connectivity. Therefore, we urge for East-to-West cooperation. Therefore, we have been a big fan of Eurasian cooperation. You know, unfortunately, now with the war in Ukraine, this is becoming more and more complicated, and we regret to see the East-to-West links being cut, you know, day by day. And we don't know whether these links which have been cut, whether they can be rehabilitated in the future at all, and if yes, then on how long this will take, you know. So therefore, we are in favor of connectivity, we are in favor of global sharing of labor, and therefore we are in favor of those global initiatives which have been put on the table by your president, because those global initiatives help multilateralism, and the more you put efforts into strengthening multilateralism, the more chance you do have that such kind of sad developments and consequences we can see will be diminished a bit.
You said that you were personally very proud that you were the first European foreign minister to sign a MOU on the Belt and Road Initiative with China in the summer of 2015. So, Mr. Foreign Minister, what made you so proud, and what kind of new developments do you foresee in taking shape in the near future?
Look, when we have entered office back in 2010, we have understood that the stable way to stay on the ground is having both feet on the ground. So therefore, although we are members of Western-oriented integrations and alliances like NATO and European Union, we have to reach out to the East as well, because we understood already at that time that the eastern part of the world was developing so quickly, and for us it was obvious that once upon a time, which came last year basically, the East and West will be somewhere in an equilibrium. And therefore we have put a lot of emphasis on building relationships with China, with Japan, with Korea, so the major contributors to global GDP from the East. And Belt and Road Initiative was something which has helped this connectivity between geographically faraway areas, right? So therefore I was really honored to sign the agreement as a first European foreign minister. We'll continue to add additional projects to One Belt, One Road. You know that in this framework we have been reconstructing the railway line between Budapest, connecting us to our southern neighbor Serbia with its capital Belgrade. It would not have been possible, at least not in this form, if we had not been part of this Belt and Road cooperation from the very beginning.
Well, speaking of the ongoing crisis in Ukraine, you have repeatedly emphasized that the solutions that now Europe are trying to find to resolve this issue is not working. And the only way to resolve this issue is through a ceasefire and peace talks. And I assume, Mr. Foreign Minister, this is part of the reason that why Hungary didn't join some NATO member to supply arms or military equipment to Kyiv, but instead have provide humanitarian assistance to the country. So what do you think is the biggest challenge in achieving a ceasefire?
The biggest problem there, I think, is that the transatlantic world and the global liberal mainstream speaks about war. So the war rhetoric is extremely loud. That
is not helpful, right?
It's absolutely not helpful. This is a tragedy. This is a tragedy. And I tell you why. We are living in a neighborhood of Ukraine. So we have been confronted by the enormous humanitarian impacts of the war. We have received more than 1 million refugees coming from Ukraine, although we have a very short border with Ukraine. So then imagine the number of Romania or Poland has got. In order to avoid further casualties, in order to prevent other people from dying, basically, we need to stop this war.
How to stop this crisis?
Immediate ceasefire, and ceasefire gives the chance for peace talks to be started. Because you know, war is always a failure of diplomacy, but peace is always a success of diplomacy. So we should give room for diplomacy. We should give room and space for peace talks to be launched. But as long as there are countries who are believing that this war does have a solution on the battlefield, this endeavor of ours is more and more complicated. Therefore, the role of China is extremely important because, as I told you, the war rhetoric currently is much louder than the peace rhetoric. So the peace camp has to increase its voice. And to increase the volume, to increase the voice, so that's why we are happy with the Chinese peace plan, for example. We really respect that.
Right.
We support that, and we hope that it's going to be a basis for efforts to become successful to create peace in Ukraine.
Hungary has expressed its appreciation and support for China's impartial and objective stance on Ukraine issues, and also have spoken highly of its active efforts in promoting peace talks. So, Mr. Foreign Minister, can you further elaborate on the position paper that China recently released, in which it talks about the solution of the Ukraine crisis?
Well, we have two good reasons to support this plan. First, that it does exist. That's very important. It does exist. There's a plan. And second, that it is about peace. You know, because currently plans how to make peace are very rare. But statements how to go forward with the war, unfortunately, happen more often. So therefore, what has been put forward by the Chinese government is something to be supported, because that would help to create a space for peace talks, because peace talks should end up in a sustainable peace agreement, which could be a basis for the future security architecture in Europe. So we have to include Russia somehow into the future plans of Europe, otherwise we will go nowhere. And therefore, comprehensive talks about how to make peace here and how to maintain peace in the future in Europe, and what kind of role Russia would have in that, you know, effort, is extremely important. I mean, we can speak about excluding Russia from the future of Europe, but that's an illusion that will never happen.
The Secretary General of NATO has recently said that all member states have agreed that Ukraine will eventually join the alliance. But at the same time, EU top diplomat Joseph Borrell has pointed out that this is not a decision of the Secretary General himself, but rather, he said, quote unquote here, the issue is not under consideration at the moment. So, Mr. Foreign Minister, what is really going on here, and what is the stance of Hungary in the further expansion of NATO?
Hungary is a pro-enlargement country, both when it comes to NATO and the European Union. But enlargement has its own rules and regulations. And NATO must not become a party to the conflict in Ukraine. We have to do our best in order to avoid any kind of direct confrontation between the Russian Federation and NATO itself. Therefore, obviously, speaking about the accession of any country at war to NATO is a no-go, is impossible, because all new members must add to the security of NATO,
right,
and not reduce the security of NATO. So therefore, Ukraine joining the NATO is absolutely not realistic, currently for sure.
Right.
When it comes to the European Union, you know, there Ukraine became a candidate country. But there's a very clear fact-based set of preconditions a country must fulfill in order to become members of the European Union. And we made our position very clear: no shortcut.
Well, energy is one of the major concerns faced by Europe now since the escalation of the Ukraine crisis. And the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines last year has dealt another heavy blow to this issue. And Hungary has expressed its support to conduct a comprehensive, in-depth, structured and detailed investigation into what happened. So, Mr. Foreign Minister, why do you think it is important to conduct such an investigation? And also, what impact do you think the explosions of the Nord Stream pipelines has made on Hungary's energy security?
Look, the safe supply of the energy to a country is a matter of sovereignty. Because if there's no safe supply, then the given country is not free to make decisions on its own, because then it is being dependent on external factors. Right. So therefore, safe supply of energy is a security issue and a sovereignty issue. So in case there's an attack on a critical infrastructure which ensures the safe supply of any country, must be considered as an attack on the sovereignty of that given country or of those given countries. Now, Nord Stream is critical infrastructure for Europe. And exploding or blowing up a critical infrastructure is a terrorist act according to our understanding. And the fact that there has been no comprehensive, unbiased, impartial, international investigation of this action, this is outrageous. This is a scandal. My question is, how on earth it is possible that someone blows up critical infrastructure on the territory of Europe and no one has a say? No one condemns, no one carries out an investigation.
Not even some media coverage from Western media.
Well, that says a lot as well. In our case, in the recent years, we have done a lot in order to be on the safe side when it comes to energy supply. Together with Russia, Turkey, Bulgaria, and Serbia, we have built a pipeline which is called the Turkish Stream, which delivers gas from Russia to Hungary on this route. And when we built that a couple of years ago, we were threatened heavily by our friends and allies, even by sanctions, saying that it's not appropriate that we build such a pipeline which doesn't go through Ukraine. And we said, look, for us, our own energy security comes first. So it's obvious that we would like to build a pipeline which we consider safe as a transit route. And this has been proven that if we had not built that pipeline a couple of years ago, now it would be impossible to supply the country with enough gas. And if you don't supply the country with enough gas, then you cannot run your industry, you cannot run your economy, you cannot heat the houses and flats of the people. So now, why our energy or gas supply is safe is because we have built this pipeline, and the supplier is reliable, and the transit countries are reliable.
Well, Mr. Foreign Minister, you became the Foreign Minister of Hungary when you were only 36 years young. So over the past 10 years, the world has undertaken unprecedented challenges and changes in terms of global landscape, right? So what are some of the major takeaways for you to serve as this role?
I think it has been proved in the recent years that only those countries can be strong who are not ready to give up their national interest against any kind of pressure. If you give up your national interest, if you give up your strategic assets, if you are not ready to withstand the pressure, if you do not stick to your heritage, culture, religion, national specificities, then you're going to be lost. I think the challenges of recent years have shown that we Hungarians could remain successful because we have addressed all those crises which came towards us on a Hungarian way, and we have not been leaning into international mainstreams.
What is so special about the Hungarian way? Stick to what you believe in?
Yeah. It's about the compass, where the compass is showing, and our compass is always showing towards national interest. So we always put national interest first and act accordingly. When it was about the migration crisis, we have not allowed people limitless, coming to Hungary. We have maintained our right to make our own decision, whom we allow to come in and whom we do not allow to come in, and we have built a fence on our border. When it was about the COVID, we had not been waiting for the European Commission to finally sort out agreements with vaccine producers, but we have bought vaccines from the East. And when it comes to the war, we made it very clear that our number one job is to stay out, is to protect the Hungarian people from the war and from its consequences. That's why we are not delivering weapons, and that's why we are doing our best in order to stay safe.
You used to be a professional futsal player, but in those games, right, utility...
Far away from professional, let's say.
But in those games, teamwork and unity are crucial. And we're really curious to know that are there any parallels between diplomacy and playing futsal games?
Of course, there are a lot of similarities between sports and politics, because both of them are team sports, are team activities. At the end of the day, we are dependent on our colleagues a lot. We are dependent on the team a lot, regardless of individual, let's say, abilities. At the end of the day, the added ability of the team, what counts. So, and you need characters, absolutely. So you have to be brave enough to stand up for yourself. Even if there's a bigger power coming towards you, you have to do your best in order to withstand. You must never give up. So I think what you can learn on the football field can be utilized very well in politics as well.
Let's talk a little bit about Taiwan question. Well, during his recent visit to Europe, China's State Councilor and Foreign Minister Qin Gang has reminded the world again that Taiwan's return to China is an inherent component of the post-World War II world order. But now it seems that some countries are trying to distort this China's domestic issue into an international issue. So what is your take on China's Taiwan question, as well as the country's pursuit in peaceful reunification?
We stick to the one China principle. That's not a question. And that says everything about that. We'll always support the territorial integrity and sovereignty of all countries in the world, including China. And we are concerned about those statements and actions which might provocate, let's say, serious impacts or serious actions here in and around China and this region. So therefore we urge everyone to respect the one China principle, which we do.
Well, Mr. Foreign Minister, it was a great pleasure talking to you, and thank you so much for sharing with us all those experiences and your very valuable insights. Thank you so much.
I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you very much.
During our interview with Hungarian Foreign Minister Mr. Péter Szijjártó, he said the compass of Hungary always shown towards national interest, and the best way to safeguard national interest is defending peace, resolving disputes, and achieving win-win cooperation. With that, we're going to wrap up this edition of Leaders Talk. I'm Zou Yun reporting from Beijing. Many thanks for watching. See you next time.